When I was 22, I moved to Berlin without any connections to the city. I had no friends that lived there. I had no family that lived there. I'd only been there for 3 days before on a vacation, but nonetheless, I got a job at a German startup. I moved there, I built up my community and friend circle, and then 3 years later, I moved back to San Francisco, where I am today. So what the heck, Ian? Why did I do that? How did I do that? Was it worth it? These are all the questions that I'm going to talk about in this video today. I'm going to start with 1, how I moved to Berlin with 0 connections. 2, the pros and cons of this decision. Was it worth it? And lastly, why I moved back to the US 3 years later. Let's do it. Okay, so how I moved to Berlin with 0 connections. Okay, so to set the scene, I was living in New York. It was my junior year of college. It was the summer, and I was working at PepsiCo out of White Plains, New York.
It's our first day. Woohoo!
I put on a collared shirt every morning and I took the bus from Manhattan up to the suburbs in White Plains. It was the corporate life. It was great. There was a great salary. There was great career opportunity. There were super nice people. It was super comfortable, but I felt like I wanted something more adventurous in my first year after school. So in the start of my senior year, for fun, I started applying to jobs in Europe. I did so by looking up the most well-funded startups in all the cities that I knew were tech hubs in Europe. So Berlin, Amsterdam, London, Paris. These were on my radar, looking for the companies that would be speaking English in these cities. I made a list of the companies. I was looking for their open roles in a marketing department. And I also just started on LinkedIn messaging recruiters and HR people at these companies. I met the company that I ended up working for at an engineering career fair on campus. Was I an engineer? No, but I went to the fair anyways. I was talking to them. They only had engineering roles available, but I got to know the person well. And I started asking, is there roles available in the marketing department, which there wasn't, but she still connected me with someone on the team to have an initial call. And this ultimately led to the job. So why does this matter? It matters because finding that German job was such a game changer for me in being able to move to Europe, because they already had a team and a lot of people in the same boat of needing to move and figure out all the immigration paperwork and all this kind of thing. I had someone to ask about finding an apartment, about getting all the papers sorted, and that was really a game changer in being able to make it happen. So to recap, I actually found my job before I moved to Berlin, and that was really important because on day 1, I already had an income and I already had a network of colleagues, which later became my friends, that I could start to meet with and have some resemblance of a social life in Berlin, even when I didn't have any other family or friends there. Alrighty, so part 2, let's talk about, in hindsight, the pros and cons of moving to Berlin as a life choice. I'll start with the con, which is that it is lonely, especially at the start. Now, before moving to Berlin, I'd never spent so much time alone in my life. And this may sound dramatic, but before this, I was only living in major US cities with all my college friends. So it was really something different. Suddenly, I was in this foreign country and I didn't know anyone and I didn't have anything to do on the weekends. It was also COVID, so that of course didn't make it any easier, and no one was hosting big events. It took me about a year to make friends and about 2 years to make really good friends. And that's kind of the reality of moving to a place where you don't know anyone. The other side of this is that during this time, I think I also developed a sense of independence that I would never have gotten had I not thrown myself in this situation. I got really comfortable doing things by myself, so I got really in touch with what I like to do and what I don't like to do. I got into rollerblading and would just go on long runs in different natural areas in the city and go to different parks and explore the city. And to do all these things alone, I learned to not feel bad about that, to actually be able to go and enjoy the time I was spending with just myself and not feel like that was wrong, like I should be ashamed of that. Now for the second con. No matter how you put it, this was not a good financial decision. Be warned, European salaries are like 60% of what they would be in the US. That's not true for all cases, but it was true for mine. I was a product marketing manager at a startup, and if you look at the European salaries for this, it's like 56K is like the low end of that bar. And if you look in the US, it's like still 6 figures. So it's like almost double, in fact. For the same work. So it really is quite a trade-off. I was living a super budget conscious lifestyle in Berlin. I wasn't balling out and having nice dinners and all this. My rent was 800 euros a month. I was rarely buying nice things, and I really just wasn't saving that much. It's an important thing to be aware of and to consider, but sometimes life isn't all about the money. At least I hope life isn't always all about the money. The other side of this con is that if you were to move to Europe, you'd rather sacrifice your first year's salary than your 5th year's salary. So another way of looking at it, but if there's ever a time to do it, then I would say right after college is a good time, but you know that you're gonna be making this trade-off when you do so. Okay, that was the second con. Enough of those. Let me give you the biggest pro of them all. I got to experience the Berlin life. Imagine waking up every Sunday, putting your rollerblades in your bike, going to the farmer's market, picking up fresh produce, and then roller skating with your friends. Imagine a dark nightclub that feels like a dungeon with the hardest techno music you've ever heard in your life, surrounded by all these mysterious figures and your friends. Imagine your Croatian landlord who only takes cash and invites you to her apartment every month and serves you soup and tea as you give her money and count out the bills one by one. Imagine assembling your friends and they all like to cold dip and you go to the nearby lakes every Sunday and afterwards go to brunch at people's places. I could go on, but my whole point with this is that world would have totally been opaque to me as a tourist. Even visiting for a month or even visiting for the summer, it really takes time to build up these relationships, and to get to understand a city by living there is such a different thing than just visiting. And so I'm so glad that I got to have that experience and got to have those memories, and it was only by living there that I got to do so. So why did I move back if it was so nice? The short story is that after 3 years at my job, I was looking for my next role, and I was making this decision: should I look for another German company, or should I come back to where all my friends are in either New York or San Francisco and see them, because I've been missing them. I got my current job with Jam when I was living in Berlin still, and then moved back shortly thereafter. So I've been here now for a little over a year, and coming back, it was clear these certain areas of life that are just more easy mode for me here than they were in Berlin, which I would consider hard mode. Firstly, it's just a big career supercharge to be in San Francisco. There are so many ambitious people that really want to do big things. There's a lot of venture funding. So much is happening here, and you really are in the center of it. You meet all these people at parties, you meet these people around, and you're at the center of where all these things are happening, which feels really special. Secondly, personally, I find that my social life here is a lot easier because I have all my friends from college here. While in Berlin, it took a long time to build up this sort of social scene, and now I feel like I have great friends there. Back home, I feel like I come and on the first day, there's like immediately like 20 Partiful invites, and everyone is hosting all these open invite things, and it just was really easy to work back into social life here. It felt like college again. The downside here is that San Francisco is not Berlin, and the cultural vibrance that I felt in Berlin is not something I feel as much here. In Berlin, in part because of the cost of living, etc., I felt like I met a whole bunch of people that were working in different professions and had different interests, versus in San Francisco, it feels a lot more homogenous. Work has taken up more of my life here than it did in Berlin, and it means that I find myself less in interesting cultural events and less activities around town as I did when I was living in Berlin. It is a big trade-off, because that, of course, is part of a rich and interesting life. Okay, a final thought here. I want to reiterate that from my experience, I know that you don't need connections, you don't need a family tie, you don't need any reason to go live the life that you want to live in Europe. You can look into the companies, you can look into the job titles, you can reach out to the people on LinkedIn, you can make it happen. And I know, because from my experience, I did the same. Despite its challenges, I am really proud of this decision that I made, and I'm really grateful that I took on this challenge in life, and I wouldn't have done it any other way. It felt like a necessary part of the story I wanted to live in my early 20s, and now I'm glad that I'm back here in San Francisco living my next chapter. This was part of a larger series called 27 in San Francisco. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.